appreciate you making some time today. So what was your initial reaction to the Darnold trade? Did you think the Jets got a fair return sending him to Carolina?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was actually, I think a lot of Jets fans were pleasantly surprised by the return, but I think the initial response that I had was finally, finally the Jets decided to make up their mind on what they were going to do with Sam Darnold. He'd been living in limbo this entire offseason because not only Joe Douglas, the Jets general manager, but also their new head coach, Robert Saleh, who's coming from the 49ers, they would always say how much they like Sam Darnold, but they would never go as far to say that he's the future of the franchise. So it always left this limbo for the former Jets quarterback, and they finally decide to make the trade. And, it's interesting because as, the offseason's going on and you see, the Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff trade, and you see that the Bears sign Andy Dalton, and there were just all these places. Ryan Fitzpatrick signs the Washington football team. There were all these teams that seemed to be in the market for a quarterback. Thought Sam Darnold could be a possibility, but they just didn't go in that direction. So here come the Carolina Panthers. Apparently this is a deal that really got solidified at Justin Fields Pro Day, where both sides started really engaging a little bit more seriously between the Panthers and the Jets. They end up getting it done. And I thought it was fair compensation coming back, considering I don't think Sam Darnold's stock really could have been any lower than at this point.
You look at Sam Darnold and the fit in Carolina, Maggie. From watching him up close, I've always felt that Sam could play. He's just been surrounded by just a terrible situation, as we all know. Carolina's certainly a much better situation. Do you see Sam Darnold having success there?
I wouldn't be surprised if he did. Obviously, he gets, reunited with Robbie Anderson, who's one of the wide receivers in his very limited time with the Jets, only 3 years, that he actually did have some good chemistry with. And even Joe Douglas, said that it was a miscalculation. They misread the market on Robbie Anderson when they were deciding whether or not to bring him back when he hit free agency before last year. And I think that was an understatement because the Jets offense was absolutely anemic. So by simply having his former favorite target back and more weapons that they do in Carolina, I think the coaching is going to be a lot better as well. Honestly, it would be hard for the coaching to be much worse. I mean, Adam Gase was an outright disaster in New York. It never worked. The offense was anemic, and it was really just, it was a brutal to watch, quite frankly. To watch Sam struggle behind an offensive line that could protect him for 3 years and one that really didn't get a whole lot more resources last year, despite using the first-round pick, the Jets, on Mekhi Becton as left tackle, so that's a spot. They really did not invest in that offensive line, nor in weapons. Obviously, Le'Veon Bell ends up getting cut, going to the Kansas City Chiefs, but he was really a non-factor here in New York also. I mean, Sam had absolutely nothing, and Sam didn't look great as a quarterback, but it certainly deserves to be said that he had no weapons around him. So I would say this about Sam in Carolina. With Matt Rule and Joe Brady as an upgrade from Gase, I mean, it can't get much worse for Sam Darnold. So I would expect that it does get better. How good can he be as a quarterback in the NFL? I don't know if anyone knows. I mean, with Sam, can he be a top 5 quarterback in this league? Obviously, he was selected 3rd overall by the Jets out of USC. There were high hopes for Sam Darnold, but I don't know if he'll ever be elite, but he'll certainly be better than what he was in New York. I think it'd be impossible for him to be worse.
You're absolutely right about that. Maggie Gray with us as we talk about the Sam Darnold trade. So, of course, with Darnold gone, the Jets not likely, they will be taking a quarterback now with that second pick. It seems like it's going to be Zach Wilson. What would your level of surprise be if it's not Zach Wilson with the second pick?
Yeah, pretty high. Just because we're kind of reading tea leaves here between the teams that made moves around the Jets and why they did or did not decide to try to engage the Jets. Number 2, like about the San Francisco 49ers, who supposedly very much liked Zach Wilson, but didn't even call the New York Jets. And considering all the crossover between the Jets front office and coaching staff, the fact that maybe there could have been some institutional knowledge there. We had the report that the Philadelphia Eagles wanted to move up but would only do it for Zach Wilson. They decided instead to trade back out of that pick and go back down to 12. So it's like, I think that we kind of can read the room that the Jets do like Wilson. But I'll be honest, General Manager Joe Douglas has now been on this job. This will be his second draft in about 2 years on this job, a little bit more. And he's been a really difficult guy to read. He really has cleaned up a lot of the leaks that happened in the Jets facility. There's not a lot of information coming out. So would I be totally shocked if it ends up being a Justin Fields, pardon me? I guess I would be, but at this point, it's hard to get a beat on Joe Douglas. So I really think anything's possible. But the rest of the league has kind of all pointed to Zach Wilson being the pick for the Jets.
Give us your thoughts on Wilson as a prospect. I know you're not watching probably every BYU game, but from the people you've spoken to, and of course from what you've seen and what you've heard, do you believe that he is, deserving of being the second pick in the draft?
Yeah, man, how tough is that, right? I mean, the kid is coming off of, coming off a season where he was completing 70% of his passes. I mean, I would say
Yep.
that anywhere you're doing that, I mean, regardless of the competition that you're facing, that's a pretty amazing clip. 33 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions, I believe, this year. I mean, it's ridiculous, the numbers that he's putting up. And yeah, it's not a Power 5 conference, but it's also not, a 1 AA either. So, I mean, I think it's listen, for all the smart people that we talk to, people who scout quarterbacks for a living, they love him. They love what he's able, the athleticism, his ability to throw on the run, the different arm angles, which obviously became a really big talking point with quarterbacks like Kyler Murray. And Patrick Mahomes, obviously, but I really think that, he's going to have the tools, a little bit undersized, but obviously I think that others in the NFL have shown that you can play this position undersized. It's really just going to be about what is he stepping into. Like, the second overall pick is going to be stepping into a starting position with the New York Jets in a season that's 17 games. And does he have, first of all, the weapons? The Jets have done a little bit in free agency, but they didn't go bananas. And is he going to be able to be protected? I mean, this is a kid that is probably not going to be playing with a lead most often. So is he going to be able to, adjust on the fly to life in the NFL? I think it's impossible for any of us to know. But with the upside that the Jets see, I mean, I think that they're obviously pushing all their chips in the middle of the table, thinking that the BYU quarterback is the guy.
Maggie Gray from WFAN in New York joining us here on the Jake Asman Show, talking about the Jets trading Darnold and Zach Wilson likely being the guy for New York with that second pick in the draft. You look at the Jets over the next 2 years now, Maggie, they now have 21 total draft picks that Joe Douglas has been able to build up. From what you know about Joe, you mentioned the lack of leaks, which has been refreshing to see as a Jet fan. Do you believe that Joe Douglas is the right guy, to really, lead this rebuild going forward for this team?
Well, he's going to be able to really dive into what is his bread and butter, and that's what everyone has said, that, scouting and college scouting really is his thing. Because to be honest with you, I mean, if you are a Jets fan, I don't think the free agency, at least this year, has been better. But last year's free agency left a lot to be desired with Joe Douglas. But again, he was definitely, first year on the job, inheriting a roster that was really bad. I personally believe that the Jets were actually organizationally tanking last year to try to get Trevor Lawrence. So that was where I sort of stood on things. And I thought that was actually a pretty smart move considering where the franchise was. They ended up getting the second overall pick instead of the first. But I think the fact that they're going to be building through the draft is probably a good sign for Joe Douglas. His first draft class has been okay, pretty good. I mean, Mekhi Becton, I think, is definitely your long-term solution at left tackle. And I think they definitely found somebody in Mims if he can stay a wide receiver out of Baylor. See about the running back, P. Ryan. I think it was okay. So I probably would be encouraged. One thing that I would expect for the Jets, though, I would expect that there are going to be major players just in this draft and the next draft moving all over the draft board. I mean, you don't have those kind of assets if you're going to sit there and take them. I mean, Jets fans will know what I said when I say this. He's not John Idzik, so I think that he's going to be using these picks, packaging them, and really going after targets that I think can play right away. And I would expect that, obviously with the second overall pick, they got 2 first-round picks this year. They've got 2 next year. They've got 7 picks in the first 2 rounds this year and next. I think they're just going to be major factors in the draft, moving all over the draft board. So I expect some real fireworks, quite frankly, from Joe Douglas in the draft.
He can't do any worse than Idzik and McCagnon did, Maggie. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, it can't get worse than what John Idzik and Mike McCagnon did during their time with the Jets, right? It can't get any worse.
It cannot. It literally can't get any worse. I mean, McCagnon, who never, drafted offensive linemen and hung his quarterbacks out to dry, to John Idzik, the aforementioned, who I believe, 11 picks, and he picked all of them, or 13 picks, and he picked them all in one draft. It was just a complete lack of knowledge of how to work the draft board. I mean, the Jets fans have been suffering. And I think what's good for them is I think there is a belief that there's finally a competent sort of 1-2 punch in this organization, being the general manager and the head coach. Robert Saleh, the former defensive coordinator for the 49ers, who was most known for like his big theatrics on the sideline, and how amped up and fired up he would get. He really was one of the biggest names on the coaching sort of, in the coaching world doing interviews this year. And he picked the New York Jets. I mean, that's a pretty big surprise, I think, to a lot of people, but also I think a good omen for the Jets. They actually have people who are fired up to be in this building. The young and up and coming coaches see a lot of potential here with the Jets. And I think that Douglas Saleh together hopefully can grow together along with a new quarterback. Michael LaFleur, the brother of Matt LaFleur, is going to be their offensive coordinator. They're going to bring in that San Francisco 49ers, Kyle Shanahan offense. If they have a good running game to go along with it, it's going to be a much better product. But, it's building like from scratch. I mean, they stripped this thing down to the studs with the Jets. And so they have a chance now to build this the quote unquote right way. And I think they have some smart minds in the building to do it.
Maggie, I know you're a Mets fan, so I have to ask you, how is it possible that Jacob deGrom goes 8 innings, only allows 1 earned run, and he loses again? How is it even possible this continues to happen with deGrom on the Mets?
Honestly, Jake, it'd be weird if anything different. I mean, this is par for the course now with Jacob deGrom, right? Every single one of his, well, not every single one, but it's far too often that the Mets unfortunately cannot hit on days when he takes them out. I mean, there was a couple of years ago, it was like a full-blown story about whether or not his teammates were so nervous playing behind him because they didn't want to, let him down, especially when he was making his first bid for a Cy Young. That it was a story that they were all like nervous and shaking out of their shoes because they couldn't hit and they couldn't field behind him when he was on the mound. It's an awful story for the Mets that I wish would come to a close. But I'm more surprised now the other way, when the Mets actually come through with Jake on the mound as opposed to when they let him down.
I mean, he's going to win 100 games in his career, Maggie, go to the Hall of Fame, and that's it, 100 wins. It's just incredible. I can't believe it.
He will be the poster child for wins getting erased out of the record book as a stat for pitchers, because he's walking proof that it means absolutely nothing. It reflects zero on your performance on the mound. And it's just going to I hope it gets wiped out of the record books, and we should call it now the Jacob deGrom rule and just obliterate it from how we talk about baseball, how we look at baseball, and how we look at pitchers, because he's amazing. He's the best pitcher in baseball. And you're right. He'll go into the Hall of Fame with like 100 wins. It's going to be silly.
It's incredible. Maggie, I can't thank you enough for a couple minutes. You were great to me when we got the chance to work together briefly at the Fan a few years back. So continued success. Love listening to you and Moose every day in the midday. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Jake. Jake, really, really, happy for you. Love your show, and continued success for you as well. And we'll catch up again soon.
Absolutely. Maggie Gray. You can find her on Twitter at Maggie Gray, the co-host of Moose and Maggie on WFAN in New York.
Thanks for watching the full YouTube video. If you like what you saw, then please subscribe to my page for more content. Thank you.